Hi there. Welcome to the UnCeiling You podcast, where we break through the inner and outer ceilings that hold ambitious leaders back. I'm your host, Dr. Natalie Luke, and today I'm joined by Dr. Abby Haverman. Abby went from living a picture-perfect life to a night in jail, and you don't want to miss how she got there. It was a shocking turning point that revealed how unworthiness and self-betrayal were driving her life choices. In this conversation, Abby shows how to drop in, wake up, and rewire your nervous system to stop betraying yourself and start leading with authenticity. By the end of this episode, you'll know how to turn into your body as an antenna, catch self-betrayal in the moment, and recognize the early signs of burnout so that you can live with clarity and confidence. And since I know you may be listening on the go, I've created something special for you. When you get to your destination, head to the show notes and download the Burnout Beacon cheat sheet. This is designed to help you spot where you're leading from unworthiness or self-betrayal and reset before it spreads. This tool will help anchor in everything that you hear today. So with that, let's dig in. Hi, Abby. Thank you so much for being on the UnCeiling You podcast. I really appreciate you being here. I am looking forward to this because I know I'm going to learn so much, and I hope everybody out there also does as well.
Well, thanks for having me.
You're welcome. We're going to first start off talking about when the life that you're living isn't feeding you and you're not really willing to give it up yet. And for you, you had a white picket fence. It was perfect. The credentials, the career from the outside, everything looked perfect. But internally, it didn't truly align. Can you take us back to that moment when you realized that the life you were living was actually built on unworthiness?
Well, yeah, I mean, it looked good on the outside, but inside, behind closed doors, not just behind the closed doors of my skin, but behind closed doors in general, it was a hot mess. And it didn't really, I knew it was a hot mess, but the unworthy message didn't come to me until I actually spent a night in jail, having been arrested. And so I was about to leave my now ex-husband, who had suffered with addiction and pain issues and all of these things. And we had this really uncharacteristic scuffle that had never happened before, but I was about to leave him the next day. He was particularly out of it. And I think he also was sick. He had pneumonia, and he shoved me and I slapped him. And I ended up being arrested for domestic violence, and I spent the night in jail. And it was through that night in jail that asking myself this question, how did I get here? Like, I was a couples therapist. I was teaching couples therapy at the graduate level.
Wow.
I was so in tune to my unconscious thoughts. You know, I was in therapy. I had a consultant for all of my therapy practice. I was supervising therapists. I was all about the unconscious. I thought I had that sort of uncovered.
Right.
And here I was. And as soon as I asked myself, that question, I thought about all the things that were misaligned in this relationship and had always been misaligned in this relationship. And I heard this voice in my head. It said, well, who else was going to love you? And that's when I realized, like, holy cow, I've been driven around on a silent hybrid engine on this belief that I'm not worthy, and all of my choices and all of my actions have been driven from that place.
Wow. What a message. So the signs were there, physically, emotionally, possibly spiritually, that something was off before that crisis. Do you think most of us wait for a breakdown before we give ourselves permission to change or to even hear the message?
Well, yeah, I mean, the signs are always there spiritually, first of all. First and foremost, that is always happening. But yeah, we change in two ways. We change from having a cataclysmic thing happen to us. And we can actually say, like, when there's been a big trauma, we can say that we are physiologically changed. Something happens in the brain and the body. And that's why we can always remember certain events. You can always remember the birth of your first child. You can remember where you were on 9/11. If you're as old as me, you can remember where you were when Elvis died, And so that is one way that we change. And it is the way that most of us end up changing, because the truth of the matter is we really do run on silent hybrid engines. That's just how the brain and the body work. I call it sophisticated sleepwalking. We look great. but we're really not as aware as we think we are. The other way you can change is on purpose. And that's, I think, the way that we're all moving toward and hoping more and more people are learning that. But I do think, to answer your question, that, yeah, the way most of us change is when we absolutely have to.
Yeah. Your back is against the wall.
Yeah, 100%.
But how can we change on purpose? How can we begin to trust those quieter signs before everything falls apart?
Well, that's really a practice because we're taught, I was taught in psychotherapy school, that awareness is 50% of the problem. I remember growing up and being told, "Oh, well, you're 90% of the way there. You understand that something is not right." But that's really not true. Awareness is only 20% of change. And what we know from neuroscience now is that 80% of change comes from building mental muscle, from building the capacity to get your actions to align with your intentions and getting the whole system involved. And so it's a practice. And the best way to do that is to become quiet, to find that ways to get quiet and still in yourself. But while you're getting quiet and still, you have to settle your nervous system down because lots of people can sit in meditation and their mind is just running, running, running. And that's not really doing much if we're getting super identified with the thoughts that we're having. You have to understand that your mind is a machine. Your ego mind is always running, and there's all kinds of things that it's always telling you and saying things to you. When you can get deeper into your body and you can settle your nervous system down, maybe through heart focused breathing, or there's a number of different techniques, and develop that practice over time, you're gonna begin to notice the signals. And you can even, if you want to go back and look at situations you've been in the past, your body knew before you knew that something wasn't right or that
Mhm.
this was perfect for you. And so one thing you could do is review a decision that you made that really worked out well. And how did that feel in your body? And how much energy did you have around it? And what's a decision that you made that wasn't so good, that did not work out well? And what was the energy in your body then? When I looked back on this, I knew 100%. Oh, I knew my wedding day I shouldn't marry this person. We weren't a good match.
Wow. Huh. And going back to one of the podcasts that I had with Dr. Reeves, Erin Reeves, she talks about how there are women that are in these bad work relationships. And every time she works with these ladies, because they'll say, I didn't see it coming. I just didn't see it coming. And she'll say, but really? Did you not see it coming? Come on, did you? And they always say, you know what? I kind of did.
Yeah. And we're really trained. I mean, listen, we can say we can see everything coming because we just have repetitive relationships, and there's many, many women who will get out of a marriage and they get another marriage just like it. They lay somebody off of their business and then before they know it, they find someone else either in their business or somewhere elsewhere that's causing the same kind of problems. We can move to a new place. We can find all these external fixes. But really, your life is a mirror of you. Your external world is a mirror of what's happening internally. And we get into situations, and if we are behaving the same, if we are being the same person, if we're firing the same thoughts, we're firing the same emotions, we're having the same behaviors, we're going to just create more of the same. And so, yes, it's true that, you can see it coming because there's a certain amount of denial around it. But the real empowerment comes when you realize that it's you. It's you that is causing these things to happen over and over and over again. And that's why, the name of my TED Talk is Women's Liberation is an Inside Job.
Perfect. So let's talk about our body as an antenna. And I'm starting to think about my body as an antenna. But, the thing is that I get so focused on my ambitions, my motivation, what I'm trying to do, so focused on the goal I'm pushing, striving, analyzing, thinking that I don't pay attention to the signals that my body's sending. How did your relationship with your body change after that night in jail? How did you use your body to help you guide your healing?
Well, sadly, I don't think my relationship with my body did change after that night in jail. I think that came much, much, much later, right? I knew something had to change and I became a different person, certainly as it related to my love life in a lot of different ways. But I didn't fully understand the breakdown between my mind and my body because most of us really live from here up. So, one question is like, well, what is the motive behind your focus on drive, 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 drive? Like, what is causing you to do that? Do you have a sense?
Yeah. And it's not a very, I want to apologize, but I have to work on this. It is that I'll be happy when.
Yes. Yeah. Don't apologize for that. That's the human condition. Yeah, so I'll be happy when this happens is a belief that the egoic mind tells us, right? It's a sure way to sabotage ourselves. And in fact, that is how we sabotage ourselves, right? So there's a number of reasons that we drive toward things that are for the vast majority of us when we're not really understanding how the brain and the body work as a machine, like it's not intentional, that we're being driven by motives that are not authentic. And I did a talk on this and I created a YouTube video on it about authenticity is not as easy as you think it is. Like we think we're being authentic.
Mm-hmm.
But because we're being driven around by that silent hybrid engine, there's often this voice that is saying, well, once I get to here, I can stop. Or the voice is saying, if I get this achievement, I'll be okay. If I have this enough. And that's not like I know 100%. I don't even have to know you or know this to know about you that your goal in setting up this podcast and doing this for people was out of a true heart-led mission.
Yeah.
You have a deep, mission to help women and to bring information to them. And that comes from your heart.
Yes.
Like I know that because we don't do these things that way, right?
Yeah.
But when the nervous system steps in and when the mind comes in and the ego comes in with all of its noise, this voice that's constantly talking to us, that essence nature of us gets covered up. And this happens all the time. It happens to all of us, right? And so when that happens, that very beautiful quality in you becomes an overachiever. It becomes this drive, 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 drive. And before you know it, and this is something that happens a lot with people I work with. And I always reference once to this one client I have who, when I started meeting with her, I said, well, what's the goal? And she said, the best. I want my company to be the best at what we do.
Yeah.
And I knew that couldn't have been right because I knew her tagline was to put a megaphone in front of people who do good. So someone who comes up with a tagline that is, I put a megaphone in front of people who do good. The goal is not to be the best. That wasn't the original goal. And it's never the original goal when as entrepreneurs. We're always starting with an idea of what we can bring to this world. It's inspired. But then life happens, right? And so what happens when we begin to understand how to manage the brain and body and be a good mechanic of this machine and settle it down over and over again is naturally, she then came up with just the most beautiful mission that she didn't think about at all. It literally came through her that was aligned with really what it was always about. Right? It was just under stress. And then we have, the shame, like you said, well, I have to apologize. I need to work on this. There's no shame. There's no shame or judgment in what the mind does to us. It does it to all of us. And the more we judge ourselves about it, the harder it is to unwind the habit.
Yeah. Makes sense. So how does our body act as an antenna for us to help us bring ourselves to the point where, hey, ego is getting in the way. We need to get ourselves centered and to just centered back to who we are.
Well, the body is always sending you signals, right? It's just that we're not looking in the body. We're not paying attention to the body. So, whatever is ailing you, right? There's a metaphor usually for everything that's going on. Is there tension in your neck? Is there a pit in your stomach? Are you having some kind of medical problem? Is there, like I have psoriasis and I've had it for years, and it flares when I'm stressed, and skin problems is basically a sign that your body is rejecting itself. So talk about self-judgment, talk about like, I'm not enoughness, and when we live for decades, as I have and you have, and we wire in these beliefs, they're harder to undo, but the body is always telling you. So a simple body scan, a simple, like just checking out, like, okay, is my jaw clenched? Do I have a furrow in my brow? Am I smiling? Am I frowning? You your body, you can't get around your body. Like, if I always tell my kids, if they're eating something that they don't like, smile, because you can't override that. If you're feeling, think about how you're sitting, right? Like, sometimes I'll get on a call with someone, they'll be like this, or
Mhm.
they'll be like this, you
Leaning
know?
back or yeah,
Yeah, like,
slouching.
think about, if you're feeling empowered, if you're feeling good, if you're feeling inspired and energized, you're up like this.
Yeah,
So if you ever find yourself, really just kind of kicking yourself around the kitchen, or, and you're stuck in your head, shift your body, and your mind will follow what your body is doing.
nice,
Yeah.
nice. Now you talk about this silent engine that's been driving you. It's almost like an unconscious self betrayal, and that phrase hits me. And many of us are walking around with these thoughts, and we're abandoning ourselves. What does self betrayal look like in everyday life, and how do we begin to catch it in real time?
So self-betrayal can look external, or it can be internal. It can be what you're saying to yourself inside.
Mhm.
It can be the shame that you're beating yourself up with. It can be saying yes when you mean no. It can be overfunctioning. It can be when you're irritable, or you're lashing out at other people. These are all forms of self-betrayal, or all signs. I shouldn't say it that way. I should say these are signs that you are betraying yourself. And I have another YouTube video that I think is like 5 signs of self-betrayal, because you can tell by the way that you feel, how much energy you have, how your mood is, what state of being you're in, whether or not you have been betraying yourself. And so in real time, it looks very much like catching yourself in the moment that you're beating yourself up, or catching yourself in the moment that you're about to say yes when really you need to say no. And you will feel that in your gut. If you start paying attention, there's a place, usually it's in either your second or third center, your solar plexus or your stomach, that when someone's asking you something to do something that doesn't feel aligned with you, or that you don't have the time to do, or you just don't want to do, just because you just don't feel like it, there's a cringe, right? There's a tinge in your stomach. And when you override that, you're headed for self-betrayal. And when you, for
Yeah.
example, say yes when you mean no, you will be resentful. So if you're walking around with resentment, it's because you betrayed yourself somewhere.
I really did not want to play mixed doubles on Friday. And I
Yeah,
said yes. I really wanted to be home
exactly.
with my family.
Yeah,
And I
exactly.
freaking lost that match so bad. It was so not fun.
Right. And so what made you say yes?
Well, I felt like I was betraying my friend, but I was really betraying myself.
Yes, that's exactly it. And that's the unconscious piece. That's the hybrid engine. I will let someone down. I am betraying them. And we've been told that that's selfish. I shouldn't say no because they might want this, and I should not betray you. I should betray myself instead. That's a very damaging teaching that we've all been taught. And until we learn to unwind that, there's going to continue to be trouble in our inner world. Trouble in our inner world is going to be reflected in our outer world.
So how do you go about unwinding that?
Well, so the easiest way is to catch yourself, right? So I tell a story about when I was years and years ago. I was a step parent, and step parenting is I don't know if you're a step parent, but it's a challenging job. And I got all worked up about my stepson at the time was eating in the living room when I had said like 1,000 times not to do that. Right? And my son was sitting there with him, and then my husband was right in between them, even though he knew that I had, right? And so now my mind is going, my nervous system is completely off the rails, because my mind is like, he knew what I said to try to, I've told this kid 1,000 times. Oh, no one respects me in this house. Like, everything is just going haywire, right? And because I'm on this journey and I've been doing this work, and I know what happens when I let that negativity out of my mouth, it blows the house up. And then all of a sudden I'm the bad guy, right? And it's just a disaster. And so I shoved myself in my bedroom. And at the time, I called my Al Anon sponsor, which is the program for family members of alcoholics. I didn't have an active alcoholic in my life at that time, but those lessons die hard. We grow up that way, and it's a lifelong program. And, she said, your serenity is the only emergency. And I use that phrase very often, because if we can begin to divert our attention from what's happening in our outer world to what's happening in our inner world, and realize that the state of my nervous system is the most important thing in this moment, then all of the things that follow are going to be a lot easier, because the truth of the matter is that that wasn't an emergency. The emergency was how I was feeling inside myself. And my goal, right? My aim, what I was on this earth for, was not to make sure that there isn't orange goldfish dust on my couch. That's not my goal. My goal was to be, the best mom and stepmom I could be, to have harmony in our household, to have all these things, right? But the ego will say, that's not the goal. You're being disrespected. You can't stand for this. Don't let
Oh,
yourself get walked on.
absolutely. I hear you.
Yeah.
So you got you realized what your mission was, really authentically who you were trying to be, what your intent was, and realized, hey, the issue is me trying to get myself centered. But how did you handle it after that? What did you do?
Well, at that time, I was not as adept, calming myself down. So it took a long time. It was really an act of will to be like, I'm going to eat this negativity. I am not going to let it out of my mouth. And I can't remember actually if I actually did or not, because that's when I remember it really landing with me like, oh, we are really addicted to our emotions. I am really addicted to anger. And that's another thing about how emotions work in the body. Because I remember thinking, there's no way I'm not going to go out there and rip my husband's face off. Like, there's just no way. I cannot stop myself, And anybody who has ever had that, or, the addiction to, like, when someone really wrongs you and you have to go gossip about it, right? That's an addiction. So breaking that is, something that you have to pay attention to. So at the time, I spoke to my sponsor for I don't even know how long. And then I went for a drive. Like, I drove all around the town because I was like, whatever happens, I need to not show up this way in this moment, because that is in direct opposition to everything I'm trying to create in my life and who I am trying to become, which is more of me, more of my authentic me, more of my essence me, less of my ego me.
Right. Thank you for sharing that. So you have a course called From Hot Mess to Harmony,
Right.
which goes straight along with this story.
Yes.
And it's a great title because that's how many of us feel on the inside. Like, I can totally relate to the whole eating on the couch, although my triggers might be something different, but the feeling of it, like the feeling of you're not respecting me, 100%
Right.
relate to it. And even when we're like, we're doing so great on the outside, how do you define alignment and what does it feel like when you're finally in it?
It's very simple. It feels like freedom.
Mm,
When you are in alignment and you are in harmony with yourself, because you've made the hard choices to not betray yourself, to not throw yourself under the bus, to not give in to when the ego mind is telling you that you're being disrespected or all of these things. When you get back to that very still place inside of yourself,
yeah.
that you know.
Yeah.
And it's not about the past and what you are unconsciously projecting onto other people. And it doesn't mean that you let people walk on you. It doesn't mean that. If someone is doing something that you don't like, sometimes there's a place to say that. Very, very often, once you settle yourself down and you realize that whatever they were doing has really nothing to do with you, you're not being disrespected at all. They're just going about the world being themselves. You realize, I don't have to say anything, right? But if someone is doing something that doesn't work for you and you get quiet enough, over a period of time to realize, like, yeah, like, this is who this person is and it doesn't work for me, then that's a time where maybe you say something or you make a decision. But when you get so aligned because you've done that work of holding yourself accountable to who am I being, not what am I doing, who am I being, then the anxiety around hurting someone else's feelings goes away, because you've managed that, because you've made a decision to manage it. You've said, I'm going to choose to be anxious right now about my friend feeling that she betrayed me, as opposed to feeling exhausted and resentful later because I betrayed myself by going to play tennis. Right. So you've done that work and your decisions come not from thinking. They come from a deeper place inside yourself, a place that just knows this is what I need to do here. And it might not be popular, but it's in alignment. There's nothing inside you that feels at odds with itself.
So as you've made this connection and you were helping other people make this connection, is there a moment when you followed your intuition even when it didn't make logical sense? And what happened?
Well, yeah. So I started my career as a psychotherapist. And then when I got divorced and I got remarried, I ended up working with my husband, my second husband, in his financial firm. And I worked with him for 12 years and it was great. I mean, we built the business and, it gave us a lot of flexibility and a lot of really great things came out of it. But there came a time, probably 4 years before I stopped, that something was just not right. And I didn't know what it was. I kept thinking, well, maybe I need to get a hobby. He played softball a lot, and maybe I need to join a chorus. And I joined a chorus for a couple years. Maybe I need to start writing. And so I started writing and I did all these things. And ultimately, I decided that I needed to go back to my roots. I didn't want to go back to psychotherapy. I'd learned too much about neuroscience at that point in time. I didn't like that model.
Okay.
But I had all that experience and that knowledge that I bring to my work now. And I wanted to go back I wanted to talk to women, but not about money. And it didn't really make a lot of sense because we had a lot of freedom in our lives. We had a great business. We worked great together. It was just a whole different venture. But that's how I wound up where I am today. And it wasn't that it was easy, but it was definitely so much more in alignment.
So this season is all about building the right community around us. Of course, we're starting with authenticity, and that's why I have you on the podcast now, so that we can really talk about tuning in and knowing ourselves. And we can't connect authentically with others if we're not rooted in ourselves first. So how does embodiment, knowing your body, help us show up more fully, not just for ourselves, but in our relationship and our work?
So, as I was saying earlier, it's actually not as easy to be authentic as we thought because the ego is running the show so much of the time.
Yeah.
So, when you do get in your body and you are able to see what is misaligned, then you can show up more authentically. So, for example, when we go and do something that someone wants us to do because we're afraid that we're going to betray them or upset them, is that authentic? It's not authentic, right? Like we're there in body, but we're not there in spirit. We don't want to be there, right? That's not authentic. It would be much more authentic to say, geez, I'd love to. Thanks so much. But, I really don't want you. Right for me, right? Like when we show up to I do this one all the time because my ego, likes to be funny and likes to make people laugh and is very concerned about whether or not people like me and all of these things. And so when I go to dinner parties or things like that, I kind of check myself at the door and say, you know what? Like, I'm really glad all your ego parts are here. You helped me a lot in my life. You've gotten me very far. I'd like for you to stay at the door because tonight, when I say something, when something comes out of my mouth, it's going to be because it's iterative to this conversation. It's not because I think I need to teach somebody something or I need somebody to know how much I know or I need somebody to laugh or, whatever. It's because, and it might be funny, whatever comes out, right? But it's not going to be driven by these egoic demands of wanting to be seen, wanting to be heard, wanting to belong, not feeling worthy enough. All of these things is not going to be driven by that. And when you start to really pay attention to what is the motive, and this is a whole segment of the Hot Mess to Harmony class. It's just a little mini class, but there's one of the videos that's totally devoted to your motive. When you get curious about your motive, not shaming yourself about your motive, because we all have them. We've evolved this way, but curious about it and are able to identify it, you're going to show up naturally more authentically. You're going to start to attract the people to you that are more in line. And you're also going to show up in a way that the people who are not a good authentic match just aren't going to be interested. I moved to a new community not that long ago, several years ago, I guess now. And there was all kinds of friends I made, but there was not a match there. It just wasn't a match, And so it was more about like, how do I honor myself? How do I find the community that I'm looking for? And that's by being more of who I am and less worrying about how I'm going to find the community, who likes me, who will accept me, who will have me.
Yeah.
Authentic community is really something.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to take that to heart. We're going to go into the insider questions now. But before we go into the insider questions, I want to let the audience know that I will have Abby's contact information in the notes if you want to get a hold of her. And I'm hopefully going to have Abby in the UnCeiling You community. So you can reach out to Abby. I'm sure that you're super curious about this course. It sounds really great and something that gets us to where we want to be when we network with others, more authentic. Is there anything that you want to say to the audience before we get into the insider group questions?
I would say that the goal here is to become more of you. And so I'm developing some new curriculum now, and I call it the soul signal. And it's all about moving from performance to presence. And when you are vibrating at your soul signal, which is just the deepest part of you, the part that knows, that goes from overthinking to inner knowing, when you vibrate there, meaningful success will find you. And when you don't vibrate there, you may find success, but you're not going to be happy. You're going to be exhausted, and it's not going to be meaningful.
So when that comes out, please tell me so I can let everybody else know about it.
I will for sure.
Okay.
Yeah. And they can find all this kind of stuff on my YouTube channel too, on my podcast, The Intuition Incubator. I do a Monday muse every Monday, and it's like a 10-minute little lesson.
Awesome. Fantastic. Well, once again, I want to thank you so much for being on UnCeiling You. So glad that I met you through another guest. Yeah. And I am looking forward to this being out there. Thank you so much.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it, Natalie.
Thank you so much for joining me and Dr. Abby Haberman today. If her story resonated, remember, your body is your guide, and unworthiness or burnout do not have to run the show. When you stop betraying yourself, you open the door to authentic leadership and a more fulfilling life. Don't forget, I've created the Burnout Beacon cheat sheet to help you catch burnout early and reset it before it spreads. You'll find the link in today's show notes. And if you're ready to go deeper alongside a supportive community, come join us inside the UnCeiling Zone. Until next time, take radical responsibility for your life and watch the ripple effect unfold.